Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tenant improvements and attracting new tenants, many of them had certain clauses in the lease that allow them to exit if there is any obstruction by the city or by the improvements. The lower rate, rental rate, did not help much. So we were kind of getting tenants in and then never really got back into the 90% occupancy. I think the highest we achieved was back in 2016, 2017, with about 62 or 64% occupancy. We were hopeful that the light rail with the stop opposite the building would help.
In today's episode of the Providers, Properties, and Performance podcast, I interview Aiman Shehabi, a private real estate investor. I recently sold 7550 North 19th Avenue, which is a medical office building, and we discussed his experience as a commercial real estate investor for the first time with this property, as well as a medical office owner. He purchased the property in 2004 at a high occupancy rate. It experienced the 2008-2009 economic downturn and construction of a light rail project right in front of the property. A big welcome to Aiman, and I appreciate him sharing his story with us and taking the time to participate in this interview from a very different time zone. So, Aiman, welcome to the Providers, Properties, and Performance podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So we just worked on a medical office building that you had owned for several years in Phoenix, and we just sold it. So before we get into this, can you tell the audience from a high level overview of all of the real estate holdings that you invest in, the variety?
Well, primarily, I've been working as an entrepreneur and having several jobs for the past 30 years. But on the side, I have been doing investments primarily into real estate and mostly into residential. The property in Phoenix was the very first attempt at a commercial building. This was bought back in 2004, so we've held it for about 15 years. The first 4 or 5 years were excellent, and things with the economic meltdown and some of the other economic challenges and market challenges did not go as well as planned. So, right after that experience, I continued back into my, comfort zone of residential properties in California, as well as Phoenix and Florida.
And were you aware that when you're, yeah, you froze a little bit, but you're good.
Okay.
So were you aware when you were purchasing this first commercial property that it was a medical office building and what that required, or did you it was just a commercial property that you wanted to start investing in?
No. We were specifically looking for medical purpose or buildings, healthcare. The market in general was booming in the early 2000s in Phoenix. So there was an influx of developers and different corporations were relocating offices and headquarters from different states into Phoenix. Market was growing. A large retirement community was growing in Phoenix. Medical buildings, demand for doctors, demand for healthcare was growing. So when we picked up the building back in 2004, the performance of the building was great. We had over 90% occupancy rate. There were a lot of medical buildings coming up. So there was a very strong demand. So all the indicators were in the right place. We ticked all the boxes before we made that purchase.
And I bet the light rail didn't help at all because that was right in front of your building.
Well, that was one of the key challenges between the 2008 recession or meltdown
Mhm.
and the light rail, we pretty much lost 50% of the tenants. Suddenly, supply of medical offices was far greater than demand. There was a major correction on prices. Our rental rate went down by about 35% from what it used to be when we picked it up. And the recovery was difficult. And the light rail, the extension of that light rail took a very long time.
Mhm.
And there was very little support by the city of Phoenix. They had to do it. I fully understand, but they made it very difficult, not only for the tenants, but also for their patients. So gradually, access to the building was very difficult. Parking was almost impossible.
And it's a shame because your parking is like over 7 per thousand, which is hard to find in
Yeah.
Phoenix in that area. So,
Mhm.
if they could get to the building, then the parking there is phenomenal. But I can see what you're saying with regard to the light rail construction, because
Yeah.
it's right in front of your building, which now is an asset because, if people are using public transportation, they have a stop right in front of your building, not only for the light rail, but there's a bus stop as well. So I thought those were some key selling points that in the building itself, like the bones of it are, it's all brick, so it's going to stand the test of time. So as the tenant started to vacate, though, and then you had to re-tenant it, were you sort of shocked at the cost that it was going to require to get some tenants in, and having to re-tenant the space and do all of those tenant improvements?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the tenant improvements and attracting new tenants, many of them had certain clauses in the lease that allow them to exit if there is any obstruction by the city or by the improvements. The lower rate, rental rate, did not help much. So we were kind of getting tenants in and then never really got back into the 90% occupancy. I think the highest we achieved was back in 2016, 2017, with about 62 or 64% occupancy. We were hopeful that the light rail with the stop opposite the building would help. But I think, and you are from Phoenix and you know better, I think the southern part or that part of Phoenix never really took off like the rest of Phoenix in terms of growth and development. There's also a rehab facility adjacent to the building, and it was attracting a lot of homeless. So the cost of even running that building, we had to get 24-hour security on site all the time to make sure that unwanted individuals don't come and loiter in the building. We had incidents, where we had people, homeless people sleeping in the elevator or doing graffiti on the building. So the cost just kept on going up, trying to maintain it.
Yeah, and that's a shame because I think that there's some community medicine providers that could really, I think, help that part of town. I mean, it is 19th Avenue and it is more blue collar, but they still need, that's why I thought it, even though it did go to an investor, that going to an owner user, somebody that provided some community health services, would be a great user, and hopefully they'll attract that. I do think that that's still the best use. So and maybe doing some office, so it's not just 100% medical. Would you invest in another medical office building if you had the opportunity?
Well, it depends on the location. I think over time, one thing I learned is when you invest in real estate, I mean, get smaller, pay a little bit more money, just make sure you get some, prime location, something that is less, impacted by changes in the market, because the market will change.
Hmm.
I mean, so something a little bit more steadfast, prime location. So if the conditions or if what's on the table, if it's medical building, if it's in a great location, maybe yes. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game.
Right. Yeah. If it makes sense, for sure. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm gonna go to get to know you a little bit of this interview, so
Okay.
people can get to. What was your first job?
The very first job I had was, surprisingly, medical staffing.
Oh,
I started working for in the first 5 years. I was working for a service provider in Southern California. They were doing medical staffing and durable medical equipments to healthcare facilities. So
oh.
I've started in operations and gradually moved into sales and business development.
And I'm sure you probably invest in more than just real estate, but what would you be doing for a living if you weren't doing what you do now?
Uh, I do have a lot of interest in technology. So I've been engaged either at an investment level or strategic advisory level with a lot of the startups, and not only in the US. I mean, I work with, with globalization now, you can get to work anywhere.
Right.
I look at the Asian market, I look at the Middle East, and obviously the US.
And who are you reading or listening to right now for news, information, or inspiration?
Um, I think nowadays it's important to stay up to date with the news as they unfold. I mean, compared to 40, 50 years ago, anything that happens nowadays with globalization in any country will surely impact the rest of the world. So staying up to date with news is important. My primary focus is economics. I look at economics, and it's easy and straightforward. I look at markets. Bloomberg, Financial Times are a very good resource. I look at those a lot. I follow the news. I follow the trends. I follow markets in different countries. When it comes to politics, it's a little bit different. I watch multiple channels. I read multiple papers, but the traditional CNN, BBC, Jazeera, I listen to all of them. Most of the time, they don't say the same facts. They're different. So the best thing to do is really to listen to different views, and at the end of the day, formulate your own opinion.
Yeah, make your own decisions.
You know.
What is one thing you do every day for healthy self-care?
I travel a lot, so whenever I can, I walk. I mean, I try to do at least 5 to 7 miles a day. Currently, I'm staying close to a coastal area, so I do a lot of walking on the coast, at least on a daily basis, whenever I can.
Yeah, you can walk anywhere. I think it's been a new trend
True.
since the pandemic. And in your opinion, are leaders born or trained?
I think they're both. You've got people who are born with national traits, leadership traits. They're sharp, they're intuitive, and you've got, a different group of people that have significant experience in leading roles where they have acquired a lot of these characteristics that qualifies them to be leaders. But at the end of the day, it's leadership is leadership. It's what you do with it, how you lead, how you take care of your team, how you inspire and influence and impact other people's lives.
Right. How you move things forward.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Aiman. This has been a great interview. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me. And, I wish you all the best. And I'm sure our path will cross again.
Absolutely.